So we're coming to the finish line. We're leading.
And that will about do that. We got the old Trumpster popping on there. We have a special guest this evening. Catholic Esquire is with us, and we are going to talk a little bit about the statements. Hello, Jackie. We're going to talk a little bit about the Pope Francis's remarks this week regarding his indifferentism, and just general ideas like that. Catholic Esquire has a channel over there, and he's made a couple. Hey, John, from Houston. Hey, in the neighborhood. And so we're going to kind of go over some of those ideas, just generally. And we're not even going to play the video from Indonesia. I think people have probably seen that one ad nauseum, but we got a couple videos, and we're going to chit and chat and maybe just talk to our guests here in the house. So without any further ado, Catholic Esquire, how are you doing this evening?
Good. Thanks for having me back, Dr. Haugen. Always good to see you and be back to talk about all the craziness going on in the church right now.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you were a little bit passionate this week. I like that.
Yeah, I got fired up, but that's actually sort of the point. Sort of the point of what I was trying to get across is we really should, as Catholics, be fired up by the fact that the man who claims to be the Pope is not just speaking heresy, he's literally preaching heresy to the entire world. And it ticks me off, and for a lot of different reasons. And I was a little upset by the fact that there's actually people out there who are in mainstream Catholic media who have access to a lot of people and have a lot of influence and are considered reputable, and they're running around trying to excuse blatant rank heresy. So yeah, I was fired up.
Yeah. Now White Wolf over here says, I don't know if you're joking. You didn't see the video of him with the kids in Indonesia. I thought how could you not see that? It's all over the place. But I think you're joking, right? I'm fired. Jackie's fired up. She's ready to go. I tell you what, I'm going to give you, okay, before I play the first video, I'll give you my theory on the indifference, these kind of statements, ecumenical in some respects, and the probably larger program of the church reaching out over the last, what do you want to call it, 50 years. So I think it has twofold objective. The kenosis of the church, in other words, the designed or controlled demolition of the church for one. And well, I'll say the reason I say that is because that's exactly the effect it's having. Nobody's grabbing onto the church. In fact, if I go to a list of all the Protestants and other, the Orthodox, I mean, they're just like, is this for real? Like, are people really following this guy? So it's not like, oh, we're all coming to the church. It's having quite the opposite effect. So I think it's part of a controlled demolition. At least certainly that's the effect it's having. And number two, I think it really opens up not just this idea that there's many paths, but in particular, the dual covenant thing that's always just had the camel's nose in the tent over the last 40 years. And it's going to really open up that. So that's, my little take on that. Do you want to respond before I play a little Pope-splaining?
Yeah, I'll respond to both of those. I totally agree with you. I've always thought that, when we talk about the and I know we have to be careful because we're on YouTube, but when we talk about this global worldwide agenda that's going on, this is it really is a Freemasonic issue. This has been going on for a while, and there's a large segment of society that wants to destroy the church and has wanted to do so for a long time. And they figured out that the way to do it is to infiltrate. And that's what they've done. And because I do believe the Catholic Church was and continues to be the last defense against this effort by the globalists and this anti-Christic spirit, the church, the true church, is that last bastion of defense that they have to take down. And they know in order to accomplish their ultimate goals, they have to take down the church. And they were in it for the long haul. And they went in it for the long haul. They infiltrated. It took many years to get these people in. And now they're at the top. They're in the hierarchy. The cancer is growing. It's in there. And that is, I do believe, what they're trying to do. As far as your second point goes, I also agree with that completely. And you might know this, maybe not, but this is not Francis's first heresy. He's had many issues before, and one of them, and I didn't realize this until recently, one of them was back in one of his first encyclicals, Evangelii Gaudium.
Okay. And
in paragraph 247, he specifically puts in that document, an encyclical, so it's official teaching, his official teaching, that the old covenant was not revoked.
That's dual covenant theology. I'll just play some Bible banging, Bible college kind of just pastor on here.
Mm-hmm.
That, I mean, obviously a lot of Protestant evangelicals buy this heresy, but a lot do not. And so, I mean, if some of them, that is the last bastion. And that comes back to one path. And that little sneaky thing has been in the air for 500 years, starting with the Protestant Revolution. Let's play a little sophistry here. Not that I'm down on Catholic answers, but here's some, these guys are slick.
Mm-hmm.
Are all religions different paths to the same God?
So I'm assuming that this question is prompted by the remarks of Pope Francis when he was in Singapore, which got a lot of traction online, needless to say. And so it's going to depend upon what we mean by different paths. Okay. So
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt. It depends on what the definition of is. I had to drop that in there. Right? Were you thinking the same thing?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Paths means they're all equal paths to get to God, and no one is better than the other. Well, then this would be at odds with Jesus's teaching and the infallible teaching of the church. Jesus is very clear. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So if we're going to go and say that religions are equal paths and they're all the same and there's no difference, well, then that's just going to directly contradict Jesus, okay? And the infallible teaching of the church, which the church has said, the fullness of the truth and the life that Jesus came to give us subsists in the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is established by Jesus Christ, and there is no salvation apart from the church. That is to say, anyone who is saved is going to be saved insofar as they are united to the church, at least in an invisible way, if not responsible for their lack of visible unity, okay? Now, if by different paths, and this leads us to the second interpretation, if by different paths we mean each religion is an expression of man's attempt to relate to God, each religion is sort of this path in virtue of which man is trying to order his life to the God that he has come to know through reason, say, well, then this wouldn't be at odds with Jesus' teaching or the teaching of the church. Consider this, Sai. Religion, as St. Thomas Aquinas teaches, generally speaking, denotes man's relation to God as the source of his being and the end of his life. So when human beings attempt to live out that relation to God, they're engaging in religious activity. And that attempt is a means by which one can find God, assuming they're invincibly ignorant of the fullness of the truth that Jesus entrusted to his church. So depending on how we interpret the different paths will determine the answer we give to the question, are all religions different paths to the same God? Now, as to which meaning Pope Francis was latching onto, which of these meanings did Pope Francis intend? Well, on the surface, given his statements, whenever he said every religion is a way to arrive at God. And then there was some back and forth with sort of the translation of that, ending up, as I understand it, all religions are paths to God. On the surface, I can see how some would be led to think he's asserting the first meaning of different paths, like religious indifferentism. I get it. I sympathize with those who might be initially frustrated in thinking, oh my gosh, this is what Pope Francis is saying. Because on the surface, it does seem to say that. But I do have a hard time believing that that's what Pope Francis intended to assert. Because in doing so, he would be denying our Lord himself, which I don't think Pope Francis wants to do, nor does he intend to do. And I don't think he wants to be contradicting the infallible teaching of the church. So I am willing to give Pope Francis here the benefit of the doubt and say that he meant to assert the second meaning that I articulated previously. He just didn't express himself in the most precise way that we would prefer, right? And listen, that happens all the time, right? So I don't know about you, but I know very often
yes.
I will say something, and man, this happens all the time in conversations with my wife, right?
Okay.
I mean, they must really think we're stupid. I mean, honestly, and I Catholic Answers, I used to like Catholic Answers, Dr. Haugen. When I was really growing in the faith and I was attending Novus Ordo and I was teaching RCIA, I bought a lot of their books. I listened to their show. I mean, I thought they did a good job of countering a lot of the Protestant arguments. But when they lost me was when Tim Staples did something very similar to that with Amoris Laetitia, when he was trying to argue about how a person who's living and sleeping with someone who's not their wife could possibly be doing that without knowledge or intent, and therefore it's not mortal sin. I mean, he sat there and tried to explain how that's even possible. He went through all the mental gymnastics just like this guy did, and it's almost borderline insulting. But what Francis said was very clear. He said the first translation was done. The translator or the interpreter was sitting right next to him. It was his interpreter. It was interpreted as things went along. There were plenty of pauses to do corrections. Most people I know that know Italian said it was perfectly accurate translation. And he's had over a week now to correct it, and he didn't. All they did was have his staff people fumble around with the interpretation of the translation because they knew it was heresy. So, I mean, this is just so unbelievably ridiculous. And that was mental gymnastics. Perfect example of mental gymnastics. Crazy.
Yeah. I thought it was kind of interesting for the week. Honestly, in variations, it's been going on for a long time, but it was so in your face this week that I just had to. I usually don't let them come up in my suggest box, but I had to see how the Pope Splainers were going to cover this one, and because they knew other channels were putting the full context, and there could be only one way, and they know the shenanigans with changing the translation, then changing it back. There could be only one way. He had time to retract it. And it really is a question of where are we now? Now, I've kind of always been there, but I just want to see how the influencer world's going to kind of deal with it. And some of the chief Pope splainers kind of did the old number like, look, I'm not going to be a Pope splainer. But then they kind of did this long thing, St. Augustine here and encyclical here. And it's like, what are you saying? Get to it. Like, what are you saying? And it's always like, it would have been nice at this point. What an opportunity to say that woulda, coulda, should have. This is really bad. And if I were going to put up a video here, just what are all the Protestant reactions? And it's kind of sad that, more mainstream Catholics aren't. I mean, this is 101. This is a problem. And variations of this have been coming out for a long time. I think like this, we're talking about, to be a little bit dramatic, we're talking about the restrainer here.
Yeah. It's denying Jesus Christ. I mean, that's essentially what it is. We're not talking about some nuanced heretical thing about, whether, either the types of nature Christ may have, divine, all these other disputes that have gone on in the past. This goes to the heart of Christianity, which is why the Protestants are also shocked and scandalized, because they know this is basic. I mean, that's why it's so disingenuous when people say Francis didn't intend to say what he said, because it's such a basic concept. And so they come up with these ideas and they say, well, it was ambiguous or unclear. No, it wasn't. It wasn't ambiguous. Just because you in your mind can think of a way he should have said it that wasn't heretical doesn't mean that's what he said or intended. I believe I'm being quite charitable, and I am saying I believe the man when he says his words. I don't think Francis was necessarily lying. I don't think he was being reckless. I don't think he was intentionally trying to scandalize people. I think that's probably what he thought, because he said things like that before when he talked about God wills the diversity of religions in Abu Dhabi in 2019. It's basically the same thing. I mean, I just take him at his word, and that's what his words are. And it wasn't unclear or ambiguous. It just wasn't.
Yeah, I think that he's preparing the world, all the people that are kind of lukewarm or indifferent or just easygoing about this. They'll kind of they have itching ears. They want to have an easygoing explanation. And I think it's preparing the world for a shift in consciousness, or whatever your legal format. Okay, I have like another event that happened. I just got this one today, but I just think it's interesting that it happened in the same week. But I want you just to, I know that that's the thrust of the, a lot of people are saying, like, I think, trads are still there. I don't think they're going to become sedevacanists, because it's not a new thing or anything like that. The sedevacanists aren't going to go into the church. Protestants, I think that, I don't know. I don't know. I think it's got to be confusing. The hardest thing are people that are apologists for the church. How do you explain? I have an explanation, but nobody goes in that direction, which is this is the vindication of the church, because this is part of Catholic prophecy. So, but that means you have to, here's what Catholic Answers doesn't do. And this is where the gaslighting is. And I've heard you mention this before as well. They don't want to do pattern recognition because they're talking to normies. So there's no pattern recognition, and there's can't read the writing on the wall, the tea leaves, this and that. And as you've suggested before, there's kind of a problem with that, right?
Yeah, they're not going to go there. They've made that very, very clear. And so I just think the honest thing to do would just be to say what it was. Yeah, it was heresy. And we hope that if he didn't intend it, he'll come out and correct it. That's all they have to say. But they're going, they're insulting everybody and going through these mental gymnastics to try to say he didn't intend what he said, when there's no evidence.
Even he doubled down.
He didn't intend it.
Yeah, I didn't watch the videos, but I've seen a lot, like Pope doubles down. So I think he came back and said, nope, that's what I meent.
Well, he came back, I think it was at a different meeting a couple days later, and basically said the same thing. I can't remember exactly what it was now. It was a quick one-liner, but it was along the same lines that basically said God, all religions are a gift of God, I think is what he said. And so that was a speech literally 2 days later, after he would have been aware of all the controversy on the first one. And so, and then they changed the translation one time. They went totally overboard on that to make it not heretical. And then they pulled that back. And so then they put some of the things that made it more heretical back in. I mean, it's just that is gaslighting. They're trying to make people think they're crazy for saying what they heard, what everybody heard. And they're saying, no, you didn't hear that. That's not what's really going on. And then they even try to, like 1984, change the record of it. Go back and after the fact and change the record. I mean, this is, I had Dr. Haugen, well, I still do. I talk to a Protestant regularly, and she's very close, I think, to coming into the church. And this was a really big setback, I think, this last week. It was a big setback because, she's saying, and a lot of the Protestants are saying, so you're asking us to join a church where the Pope, the person who's supposed to be, the unity of faith, because you always say we don't have the same faith and all the Protestants can't agree on what we believe. And here you have that man who's saying that essentially it doesn't matter if we're Catholic, or it doesn't matter what religion you are, or really implicitly denying Jesus Christ as the mediator. Yeah, that's kind of a big problem. And I understand why they would say that. So it just makes our job, who's trying to evangelize them, that much harder, which I'm not afraid to do. I'm perfectly willing to talk about the crisis in the church with people who are thinking about coming in. I'm not like Catholic Answers, who tries to push all that under the rug. I think honest people who speak about truth and who deal in the world of truth and who want to save people's souls need to be honest and truthful, and try to explain as best you can that, there is a crisis in the church. We've been through crises many, many times over 2,000 years. Every single time the church ends up coming out of it one way or the other. And that's more proof that this is the true church instituted by Jesus Christ. Because yes, we agree, part of the church is, there's a human element to it. So there's going to be sin, there's going to be error, blah, blah, blah. But we always get through it. Name one other institution that's been around for 2,000 years. One other state, one other government, one other business. Nothing. There's only been the Catholic Church around for 2,000 years. And we'll get through this crisis just like we've done in crises in the past, one way or the other. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like.
Yeah, and I have no problem with a church and an anti-church and the same Pope being in charge of both at the same time. I have no problem with that. Some people think it's weird, but the argument is, are they both inside the visible church, or is the anti-church both inside? That's whatever. You can work with that. The one thing I might differ is a lot of the prophecies that point to the apostasy and the hierarchy of the church are in the latter days. And there's often even connections, depending on what text, with the advent of the construction of the third temple, locked and loaded, with impending population control. We'll say that. All these things, AI, a lot of things are locked and loaded. I don't think it's kind of terrible to kind of just put that on the table, and that part of being faithful to the church is the part that you're walking with Christ, his mystical body, to the cross, where not many people are going to do it. It's just a chance of disorientation.
In other words, saying we might be in the end times, and that these are.
Yeah, I made a video this week, and I said I don't see why that's I know throughout the church history, there's a main point in my book that leads to social disrailment when it's henny penny and everything's going to fall down. It's usually something Catholic or evangelicals kind of do. But I think that we're living in an age of deception. I think most people can go along with that part of it. And that's also what many of the prophecies say. All these things are in the line, but yet most people just can't go there for whatever reason. There's kind of a darkness. I'll do another. This is kind of coming out of left field, and I don't know if they're connected, because we can just kind of go round and round at this point. It's like, what do we do with this? I think most traditionally minded people are kind of prepared for it, or they've been thinking about it. So it's not too shocking.
Right.
And I don't know if this event is necessarily connected, because everything just gets stranger each week, right? But here's something just to kind of say, we're moving from one civilization to the destruction and the emergence of another. Christ, Antichrist, I believe, right? And part of it is, and even we don't even have to talk about taking the mark, but we saw those kind of, stepping stones over the last 5 years: buy, sell, get with the program. Let me just play a minute. This is from Jackie, if she's out there. She showed me this kind of a geopolitics channel. And let me see if I can.
The vast majority of countries on earth voted at the United Nations to condemn Israel's illegal occupation of Palestinian territory, and they demanded that Israel end its occupation and withdraw all troops and settlers within 12 months. The vote was overwhelming, with 124 countries voting in support of the resolution, just 14 countries voting against, including the United States and its allies, and 43 countries abstained. And you can see very clearly a trend here. The West.
Okay. So to put this in context, this is the Christian West. Of course, a big chunk of that is Alaska there. And we know who the ruler of Argentina is right now, but not even NATO. So we're talking about Israel and the United States and the couple people they can kind of strong arm here. That's the Christian West. And all of these Buddhist countries, Hindu countries, they can get it right ethically and morally. And you can't get in America, and even in a Christian conversation, to kind of say, yes, raping and murdering people that aren't even charged with a crime, burning down. You can't get it to talk about it, to think about it, to address it. That has to come up. Now, I know we're talking about Pope Francis, but I think these are happening at the same time. And I think his statements don't come out of the blue. There is a time of transition. Well, given that, like, and what the resolution was, you go back to 1968, I mean, it's not just stop doing it or doing a peace accord. I mean, it's like the world is tired of this, even if they're going to take blowback from the colonialists. They see what's right and wrong. And here in the Bible Belt, I got my Bible, can't see it. Okay. Now here's the part that I want to get to. Okay. Everybody came out this morning. I'd almost wonder if this was real, because he said something like this 5 years ago. Whoops. Here we go.
Despite presiding over this explosion of anti-Semitism, Kamala Harris has done absolutely nothing. She has not lifted a single finger to protect you or to protect your children or to even protect you with words. I'm here today to tell the Jewish American community that this ugly tide of anti-Semitic, pro-Hamas bigotry and hate will be turned back and crushed starting at noon on January 20th, 2025. Thank you.
And I think the suggestion is he's going to, there was hints of capital punishment. And so think about what he's saying. So now I don't know, is this just like, hey, I'm going to take care of the deep state, just chop, chop, chop. I'm going to take, Hillary will be behind bars, or are his donors, is that one of the things he wants to take care of right now? And we don't have to get into the JQ tonight. That's kind of not where I'm going with this necessarily. But I think that we have to kind of, forgive me for having pattern recognition going on sometimes, that these are, and I think Pope Francis is kind of sliding people into a new worldview at this time. But again, think how shocking that is. This is most of the world saying this is wrong. We've already seen the anti-Sem measure just for criticizing them. You're put on some kind of list. And I think this is one of the things that I tend to think, I think it's going to come with any administration, no matter what. But your thoughts, Catholic?
Yeah, I don't think it's an accident. And like I said at the beginning, I mean, there is a pattern of Francis. The heresy, he says a lot of heresies. Okay, he's insulted and said heretical statements about the Blessed Mother. He said some other things, but the biggest ones always have to do with the denial of Jesus Christ. Yeah. And I pointed that one out to you in Evangelii Gaudium. There was Amoris Laetitia, which is basically saying it doesn't matter who receives Holy Communion, Christ. We see Abu Dhabi, where he says God wills the diversity of all religions. We see the most recent one as well. And all of these things are a denial of Christ. And, there are certain religions that's the basis of their existence. And then there are other ones who obviously just reject Christ. This did begin with the Second Vatican Council, where they started in with that idea of the Church of Christ subsisting in the Catholic Church, rather than saying the Church of Christ is the Catholic Church. That did begin with the Second Vatican Council. We saw the documents of the Second Vatican Council sort of laying the groundwork with other religions, including Judaism. And I think this was all that match was lit a while ago, and now I think we're starting to see the fruits of it. I don't doubt that you're correct that there's some possible connection there.
Right. And at any point, I guess the issue that I would have is that we're in a transition. That's undeniable, and it's going to come easier. It's going to come hard. And that's what's going on. Christian civilization is being challenged to see if people will offer any pushback to it. And at this point, we have people saying, well, that's a problematic statement, but it doesn't seem, we talk about the resistance really within Christians. There doesn't seem to be a will to really resist sin or this onslaught of a worldview that hates Christ.
That was really that's why I was so fired up this week. I was just so disappointed by the lack of willingness to even engage the discussion. And it really disappointed me. And then people who I think are pretty smart people coming out and trying to make excuses, like we heard from the Catholic Answers clip. I pointed out one from Father Longenecker, who is also a pretty well-known celebrity priest. He did the exact same thing. He said, well, it's just ambiguous. No, it's not. People are dying for the truth. They're thirsting for the truth. They want people who just speak plainly. And the truth is Jesus Christ. Why aren't we defending him? Why are we allowing this to happen and making an excuse for people? That's what we should be doing, is defending the truth. That's what this is all about. That's the whole point.
Bottom line. It's really the bottom line. And when he said that technique of saying it's people on social media with the kickback or calling it rad trads or this kind of thing, and that's where you're getting into ad hominem and all that, saying like what was actually said, not addressing that. And like, look at the rest of all of the Protestants, the Orthodox and everything like that. Everybody's going like, Catholics, hello, you got an issue on your hands. What are you going to do? And the response is, so we get some Pope splinters just going like, I'm not even going to try this one. And others are doing, like you say, the gymnastics or the gaslighting. And so it's kicking the can because we don't want to look at it. But I don't see any real resistance. And I mean,
I've heard that one too. We'll just wait for a future Pope to figure it out. Oh, well, when is that going to be? 100 years from now? 50? And what happens in the meantime? We just let a man who claims to be a Pope going around and scandalizing people, causing people to lose their souls? I mean, that's not an answer. We'll just wait for someone else 100 years from now to figure it out. I've heard that at least multiple times. And I'm saying, look, I'm not saying there's easy answers here. I'm not saying lay people can go in and just arrest Francis and deport him back to Argentina, which I don't think it'd be a bad idea. I just know that's probably not going to happen. But the first step needs to be, let's just acknowledge what the truth is. Let's just acknowledge. If we can't acknowledge the truth from the beginning, acknowledge the problem, nothing's ever going to get done.
Well, the scripture that comes to my mind right now, the word that comes to my mind is lukewarm. And the people that are lukewarm are just going to say, okay, whatever. And it's like, wow. So one of the things that people did cite that got a little worked up is like, this is what the church was built on, the blood of Christ and the blood of the martyrs. And so at this end of we won't even stand up and say, wait a minute, that's Christianity 101. You got that wrong. So
I really think this is a test. I was thinking
Yes,
about that today.
spiritually,
I'm
yes.
like, this is a test. I mean, in some way, Christ is saying who, because he told us this was going to happen, like you said in Scripture, this was going to happen. There's going to be wolves in sheep clothing. There's going to be apostasy. He's testing. We're living in this time and this place for a reason now, and now he's testing us. And I just, trying to play both sides of the fence, being lukewarm. I'm pretty sure that's not the answer to that quiz question. I don't think the answer is ever going to be just be lukewarm. That's not the right answer. I know that much.
Christ came with a sword, and he's also going to divide at the end of days the wheat from the tares. And we don't have to have the answers, but we have to know the difference between the truth and a lie. So I'm going to just play a clip. This is kind of short of, I think just some people kind of giving maybe a little bit more perspective. And I'm going to try this one out.
There was a document that came out recently here in June, and usually summer is kind of a quiet time in the Vatican, but it seems like the past few summers have not been. But there's this document that came out. It's called The Bishop of Rome, Primacy and Synodality in the Ecumenical Dialogues and the Responses to the Encyclical Ut Unum Sint. It sounds like just another document from the Vatican. I guess first off, can you explain what this document is kind of in broad terms and why we should care about it and why we're doing a podcast about it?
Yeah, I think this document is very interesting. It's a study document. There was a press conference that came out on June the 13th, and it said that there's this document that's coming out from the Dicastery for Promoting Christian Unity, and that it's a study document, and that it was published with the approval of Pope Francis, and that it summarizes the responses to John Paul II's encyclical letter Ut Unum Sint. So this was an encyclical that was released in 1995, first encyclical by a pope explicitly about ecumenism. And Ut Unum Sint was soliciting some sort of feedback from non-Catholics, the Christian non-Catholics, about how to further the ecumenical efforts with the Catholic Church. So there's a study document that appeared this past summer. And this document is very, very interesting for us as traditional Catholics and specifically with the SSPX, because we make the claim that the council itself in 3 specific areas changed Catholic doctrine. And there are others who say, the neoconservatives would say, well, no, there's no errors in the council documents themselves, but it was just the implementation of the documents that was wrong, was heterodox. And this document traces a line of continuity from the Second Vatican Council up to the present moment of this effort to effectively change the primacy of the Pope for ecumenical purposes. So it's nothing less than saying we want to change the nature of the papacy in order to favor ecumenical relations with Christian non-Catholic religions. And by doing so, effectively confirming what we've been saying all along, that the council did change Catholic doctrine in certain areas. So that's why I think it's helpful. And so what I would like to do, Andrew, today is maybe you and I can just look at the 1928 encyclical of Mortalium Animos, some passages of this encyclical by Pope Pius XI, and which gives the authentic Catholic teaching on the Protestant ecumenical movement.
Okay, I think that can get a little bit heady. One of the things he suggested there is that it really changed the form from essentially a monarchy into an oligarchy. And then he goes into that structure that the Pope's accountable to Christ instead of the hierarchy and even the chair of Peter, which maybe sounds good, but he said that is throwing the traditional order completely out of whack. This is more up your alley. What do you think of that?
Yeah, no, well, first of all, I need to say, That's Father Robinson. I know. Full disclosure, I know Father Robinson personally. So, but I will say that no, that's absolutely correct. What was said there. That bishop of what they're trying to do. The modernists are effectively trying. I believe, and this is my opinion. I don't know if the SSPX or Father Robinson believes this. But my opinion is I do believe Francis is trying to, and the modernists, generally speaking, are trying to destroy the papacy itself. And they're trying to destroy the papacy itself by redefining what it is. And effectively what that Bishop of Rome document does is it is rejecting what was taught at Vatican I. And so what they're trying to do is say this notion of the papacy can be reworked in different ways to be more ecumenical, more synodal. That's the synod. That's where the synodality stuff comes in, and we're trying to reach out to allow other religions to participate in this bigger notion of this Petrine ministry, and getting away from this whole juridical legal office. The Pope is in charge of all of the Church of Christ, that kind of stuff, getting away from that and saying it's just more of a ministry where more people can all participate in this bigger ministry that was given by Christ to Peter. And what they're trying to do is effectively pull back what was taught at Vatican I. Yeah. And the modernists have been trying to do this, yes, since about Vatican II. And I believe that's my personal opinion. This is very relevant to Benedict's resignation, but that's an entire other subject. Yeah. We could have another whole show of that.
When it turned into an oligarchical structure, well, oligarchies always, all forms of government have it poking in the back, but they love democracy. So when they're democratizing it, putting more decisions allegedly in the lay and becoming the listening church, that things are just about to completely fall, all the wheels are ready to fall off, because that's the agenda. So the synod of synodality, I guess, will keep on, but at some point I think the changes are going to be more obviously qualitatively problematic. And that's something I guess people chit and chat about all the time. Just keeping it in the bigger context. Yes, I think that the movement of Antichrist has been in here since the first century. We've been in the last days since the end of time. But we're always supposed to live our life as Christians as though it's the last days. We're always got to be prepared to spread the gospel and the truth. It does make it a little tricky with the Pope if you're trying to say the ultimate truth is Catholicism, puts a little bit of a block in. But to me, when you explain to people, it's hard because you have to kind of, first of all, people have to be ready. It's a comprehensive system. Yes. It's a mystical body of Christ that lives out his mystical body in relation to how his physical ministry happened, and that all the parts fit together. And it's the ultimate vindication that this is the passion because it's the true church. And, when we do see those days, it's a mystery. We have to allow the mystery to be the mystery, but yet at the same time, we're told about this. When you see these things happening, don't fear. And there's not much, you don't have to get much more worked up about this. But I do think what I read some of the scriptures this week, we especially, I think, have to pull away from worldliness and really, and that would be true of, a lot of people that want to explain this away, say, go to the Middle Ages and look at, the Black Plague, and it looked like everything was falling down. Fine. Okay. It's like that. We have to really kind of pull away from worldliness right now, because what I've argued, the prince of the air with AI has really tools of mass deception and signs of wonder, deep fakes like never before. And the things that we take for granted that in our comfort level, like cell phones and social media, I think we have to be more than vigilant than ever before. These things are toxic, they're dangerous, and I use them. I don't like it, but I think we have to be very mindful of the dangers of these things. What do you think about that?
Oh, totally. And I'm learning so much. I mean, every day. That's the thing. I'm learning to question things I never used to question anymore. I mean, it's like every week there's another new red pill for me. You know, and what in your show has been a big part of that too. I mean, you pointed out some things that like, wow, you know, just kind of blew my mind. I never even thought to look at that in that way. And I'm like, yeah, that kind of makes sense now. Because just like you said, the Christendom is a system, but so is its enemy. There is a system there to it. And that's part of what I try to point out, at least with a lot of this modernist stuff, is to show the connections between, you know, what was going on at the Second Vatican Council. This is very much connected to what Francis is doing now. There's a system there, and it does fit together if you look at it, but people don't want to hear that. People don't want to see it. It makes them uncomfortable. And that's part of the problem we have in this culture today, is it's just easier to sit back and say, who cares, and go watch football and turn it off and just say, whatever, I don't care. Nothing I can do. Let my grandkids deal with it.
Yeah, I think it is. All the conditions want us to be lukewarm at best. About the desolation, I watched a podcast a while back. I think it was Novus Ordo Watch, and he had a guest on there, and he did all the numbers from the Book of Daniels to Maccabees to the present day. I mean, mathematically, it really comes out to Vatican II.
I know
the whole thing. It's not like this one moment where someone's going to bring a pig up on the altar necessarily.
No.
But, you know, it really, the numbers do all add up. I don't know. I'm agnostic about it, but I guess when we think about end times and the apostasy, what I try to do on this channel is not be part of the spectacle, to kind of recognize it and be able, yet at the same time, detach and kind of always kind of pull back. And the moment you see that kind of stuff, I just encourage people to, I know it sounds corny, just get more serious about your devotional life. Really, it's a battle between the flesh and the spirit, and work through that battle with fear and trembling.
Because that's how you connect to reality. I mean, the antidote to the lies and the fake reality is reality and truth, right? And is what's a better way to connect with the truth than at the sacrifice of the Holy Mass? I mean, you know, that's Christ is the mediator to God the Father, and that's connecting with truth, and that's part of growing in spiritual life, is knowing Jesus Christ and defending him, I think, when necessary.
Yes, absolutely. That's got to be a huge part. When we think about being lukewarm and looking the other way, that they don't want that spirit of the church militant inside of us. But even though we're far away from Christendom, we have to have Christ the King in our hearts and in our minds, and we have to have the spirit of the church militant inside of us as we do spiritual combat with the world. But what I'm interested in is just seeing how what I'm doing, the pulling away from reality since the Protestant Revolution into the age of mass communication, into the age of smartphones. And now the final thing is to get the smartphone interjected into you, surveillance under the skin. And that's getting completely apocalyptic. I mean, that is, and it's all being uncovered. The book of the Apocalypse was the uncovered. The World Economic Forum is telling you the agenda. The conspiracies out there. It's quite open. So how are you going to deal with it? And I think it was a dry run what we went through the last 5 years, and we can see how it'll break down. Some people kind of woke up a little bit, but mostly people will come by and play the same part they did over the last 5 years. It'll be a repeat performance, I think, for the most part.
Because you were talking about these things before 2020, right? Yeah,
my Singularity came out in January, and I talked about beware. I think my last video that I did in 2017, I said, look, in the short term, you're going to be asked to do a squit that's going to be called one thing, and it's going to change your DNA. And I don't want to say the name of the technology.
Yeah.
So I've been into this kind of transhuman piece of it. And, in metaphysical terms, it's trading in the image of God for the image of man. It's that simple. And we do that each day when we think we deserve all these comforts with our Netflix and everything else. But we think we're entitled to these things. And I know I do. I mean, I fall back. And that's why you really have to kind of get rocky with your spiritual life and get a little bit more hardcore. And, and I think that's the solution. But yeah, you have to be aware of the media, and the medium is the messages that you become these things that you latch onto, the electrical currents or whatever they're driving from these days. And I think there is a lot of value in what Marshall McLuhan was saying, but because we don't realize that biopolitically we're being controlled from the inside out. And we just have to be wary of that.
That must have been really surreal for you, though, when 2020 rolled around, because you had been talking about these things beforehand, and then all of a sudden it starts to play out so quickly.
Yeah, I was with a community of truthers. Other people saw it, and then if you'd speak about it, they'd remove your channel or give you strikes. And it was frustrating, and it was very alienating, and being locked down. I thought it was, I literally, a lot of people did. Some people that believed it were kind of going crazy because they thought a crazy virus was coming. And then the people that didn't were getting all bummed out because they just saw the, mass formation psychosis taking place.
Oh yeah. That was really the big moment for me when I really started moving into traditional Catholicism, because they started the Novus Ordo parishes, at least by me, they were all shutting down, and everybody was saying it doesn't matter anymore if you get your sacraments. It doesn't matter anymore. It's okay. We'll wait till later. Meanwhile, everybody's still going to the liquor store and the marijuana stores we have around here. All those things were still open, and so that was really maybe that was a dry run, but it was a big eye opener for me. And I think as we move forward, more and more people, their eyes are opening to seeing a lot of this. And it's my hope that we can at least reach out to those people and kind of help bring them into the church that way, because they're starting to see things, even though other Catholics can't see. But once they start to see that, then the next question is going to be, well, then how do I know reality and how do I connect to it? That's where the church comes in. That's Jesus Christ, the truth. And the way to connect to him is through the sacrifice of the Holy Mass.
Yeah, that's how reality is structured. So whenever one thing kind of comes your way, crisis, well, not that old Japanese thing, but comes opportunity. And so many people came to the traditional, I'll say, movement, and that deeper sense of reality because of it. So it had this whole other effect. And even though it's a small number of people, it's a number of people that got it and really are committed to it. And that's what the world needs now. Of the 7 billion people in the world, they need traditionally minded Catholics, and hopefully ones that don't buy into the whole neocon view that's, I think, infected the church, but, more of a truly traditional view, and just somehow an inkling of how the modern order of things is out of sync with an integral order of things. And then we just kind of go along with that. Christ is King of our lives. Hopefully our families and our communities, that we can form around those. I think if we truly do walk in truth, Christ will give us what we need when we need it in order for our salvation. And I think the worst case scenario, some of us that really want to believe, we might be martyred. Maybe not. But what does it matter? I think in my own sinful life, it'll maybe help get me out of purgatory a little bit faster. So
me too.
So it is what it is. But I did go through a lot of stress, like this kind of post-traumatic stress disorder, just every day. How long are the masks going to be here? What's this going to be here? What kind of crazy, gaslighting is going to be on? And I didn't know, the economy was going to, and after maybe a year or two, I just said, I can't do this anymore. It just is what it is. And I have to get on with my day. Because you start wondering, can I even apply for a job? Is there going to be a future? What's going to happen? And this kind of thinking. And now we're in that because I mean, frankly, when you look at the World Economic Forum, what used to be Agenda 21 is now Agenda 30, and they popped it in on 2022, getting that thing going.
Mhm.
And it's a real deal. I mean, they'll tell you in their TED Talks and at their WEF forums, we're behind schedule. And so they do want to change things very rapidly, and they do need an event. And so when we see the event, I think just being prepared, do not fear, and hold fast to the truth throughout.
I think the event was supposed to be the virus, and I think I know this isn't what the show is about, but I think it didn't work out as well as it didn't. The biology didn't work out as well as they hoped it was going to.
I think so.
And I think that was going to be it. And I think that was going to be that event that was going to do it. And for whatever reason, the human body was just a little bit more resilient than they expected it to be. And so it didn't have the dramatic effect they wanted to. And so by that point, they kind of pretended like it was there, but it wasn't there. And after, you can only do that for so long because people go out and look around and you're like, okay, well, their body's not piling up on the streets after 2 or 3 years. And so I think they had to abandon it and
well, they flipped the script in one day with Ukraine. They flipped it, and then they wanted more disorientation, so they went to October 7th, and now we're living through that. And then it's the big G word that's going on over here. So they're going to go to maybe a plan B or C, and we'll just take it as it comes, I guess.
One attack after the other, yeah. But that's why it's that's we should have the church there on our side during these times. And unfortunately, kind of circling back to the topic at hand, we don't have that right now. We don't have that guide, that help, that force that the church should be during times like this. And we're kind of out on our own. And so we don't abandon the church because the truth is the truth and the church is the church. But we have to deal with the situation we have at hand.
Yeah. And I didn't, it's a kind of topic when we're talking about Pope Francis, Donald Trump promises that he's going to take care of those people. I think we need a community. My own actual church that I go to, I mean, I know a couple people I say hi to, but for me, my locals community here has just really, it's something I truly value. And so it's a big deal to me. It's like people that are serious about praying for one another and looking out for one another. So I feel very blessed for having that. And I do think one of the verses I read from 2 Thessalonians, it's like at this moment, you praise God, you praise, so you don't want to be living in the past. You're told not to be in this cycle of anxiety, be in the present and be grateful. And just keep it that simple. We, at some point, we can get into all the canons and encyclicals, but we also have to have faith like a child at these times and keep things very simple. And for me, the rosary is something I take very seriously right now because that's what prophecy has told us to focus on.
I do too. I agree.
So I think we're going to beat a dead horse at this point. I think it was a lot of fun having you, and we I wanted to hit it and quit it in an hour, and we're at 59. We're 10 seconds shy of 1 hour, and it was fun having you on there. I really appreciated. I was watching your shows, and I appreciated your passion this week, and I wanted you to be able to kind of get out there and spit it out to some other people.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean that's the bottom line. We don't have to have an answer, but we should have a reaction and just not be lukewarm about this.
Exactly. That's the way Catholics have always done it. We've always fought when necessary, for our Lord, for Christ, for his kingship. That's what we need to be doing, even when the enemies may be people who claim to be in the church, and we just have to man up and deal with these problems as they come. That's all I want to see.
Yeah, and if there's apostasy in the hierarchy, if you have a weak priest, lean on the martyrs, lean on the saints, lean on people that are really strong in their faith. And that's why they're there. And we have those resources as Catholics.
Yep. Thank you very much, Dr. Hagen. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. And all y'all in the chat, thanks for being with us. You guys are great. This has been Dr. Deep State. See y'all.